Welcome to the Real Estate Crowdfunding Show, syndication in the digital age at gowercrowd.com with today's guest, Joe Gagliese, who is co-founder of Viral Nation, the top influencer marketing agency in North America. I am Adam Gower, and my business is in building sophisticated digital marketing systems so that real estate developers and sponsors can raise capital online. One of my clients recently asked me to look into influencer marketing. So dutifully, that's just what I did. I contacted 20 companies who all profess to be influencer marketers, and everyone came back and said that they didn't know how to handle real estate syndication and that respectfully they would have to pass. Even my guest's team at Viral Nation passed. So kudos to Joe for seeing opportunity in the world's biggest industry, right? Real estate. It's no wonder that Joe is a recognized leader in the influencer marketing industry, and you're going to be thrilled when you hear him today talking about the ins and outs of influencer marketing for real estate syndicators wanting to raise money online. Here are some of the things that Joe and I explore today. How to identify and activate influencers, balancing influencer results with pricing, i.e. measuring performance, how an influencer campaign compares in cost and impact terms to paid advertising, and a whole lot more. You can see all the short video clips and gain access to a detailed walkthrough of the exact investor acquisition system that I build for clients in a whiteboard workshop by going to the show notes page for today's podcast at gowercrowd.com. All right, so what is an influencer? What does it mean for real estate syndication? Are you an influencer? Find out the answers to all these questions for my guest today, Joe Gagliese, co-founder of Viral Nation, right now. All right, so let's kick off. Normally, I'm going to tell you right now, normally I would ask you what your background is and tell me all about Viral Nation, but I'm going to jump in with something else this time, right?
Okay.
I got an email, as you know, from your business development team. I'm going to read it briefly to you. Someone said to me, and I told them that I was looking for influences in real estate, digital marketing for real estate sponsors to raise money online. And this is what they said. Unfortunately, I don't think this is something that would be feasible. Right? Tapping into an audience of accredited investors through organic influencer channels is going to be challenging. All right. I don't think influencer marketing would be effective for your objectives. Fantastic. That I know from the few minutes we've chatted, that just speaks to you of opportunity, doesn't it? So tell me what your response is as founder and CEO of Viral Nation to that comment.
I think that it was the right call on their part. One of our biggest things here is transparency. So if we don't think we can do something well, we're not going to do it. And if it's not something that we have a lot of experience in, we're not going to touch it. And I think that speaks well to my team, and I'm actually proud of them for that. But I think part of what we talked about right before the call is I think there are ways to do it. And I don't necessarily, I want to break out the average investor and the other, let's call them an average Joe looking for opportunity, and sophisticated investors. Okay. When it comes to influencer marketing and how to affect those two channels, my team would be 100% correct when it comes to the sophisticated investors. We have other parts of Viral Nation that are performance marketers and et cetera, who go after micro-targeted groups in order to be effective with that type of marketing. And that's a whole different ballgame. And getting to them is doable through Viral Nation, but it's not the right team based on what you selected. Now, I think there's something to be said about giving the average person opportunity to be part of something larger. And that's where I think we can talk a lot about how you could set up that type of content stream and the right influencers to get people excited about having the opportunity to be part of something they might not have ever been a part of before.
All right, so let's step back a little bit then and tell me, first of all, because you've actually already started using terms and concepts that are a little foreign to me. So I really want to drill down on those.
Sure.
So let's start with the very highest level, again, in the context of real estate sponsors wanting to raise money online for real estate projects. How do you define an influencer? What is an influencer?
So the easiest way to describe an influencer is a human who has developed a following online, on whatever platform, dedicated to a specific topic, genre, or their personality, right? So you could be a person who does reviews of technology products on YouTube and people are following you because of the topic of technology. You could be someone whose life is aspirational. So, you know, you have these nice things or you have this great family and et cetera. And people watch because you're the perfect family. Or simply you're just an expert or someone who creates stuff that people love to see. So visually, so artist, et cetera. So if you have someone who's extremely funny, if you have someone who's extremely creative, et cetera. So it's basically following humans based on a certain parts of traits and developing those audiences behind them. Does that make sense?
Yes, extremely interesting. So again, I'd like to try and drill down on some of these concepts. So the one that resonated the most to me was aspirational. Right. So if we were to look for influencers for a real estate developer who wants to raise capital, what kind of influencer might we be looking for? So, right, so, you know, who would be aspirational? Somebody with high wealth that could mention real estate investing? Or so how would you start drilling down on that to find people?
I would say that the low-hanging fruit would be just what you said, right? These people who aspirational in the sense of they've made good investments, they're entrepreneurs, they're doing it, so why shouldn't I do it, et cetera. That would be the first place I would go. But I think from a creative standpoint, that would be the place I would go last. I'd want to go to people who can, you know, influencer marketing in its best case scenario is really good peer-to-peer referral, right? So you build influencers have, instead of building a best friend who they're telling, hey, I just invested in this property through this crowdfunding, you should do it too. Imagine a person with, you know, 100,000 friends who are similar. So they don't necessarily have to be thought leaders, wealthy, et cetera, or know real estate. They just need to be trusted by that audience to say, I think this is a cool opportunity. Maybe I vetted it with my friend who is a, you know, real estate lawyer, or my friend who invests in whatever it may be. Sometimes it doesn't even need that level of grounding, but it's like, I'm a mom. You follow my page because, you know, I do cool stuff and you love the family and the stuff that I do. I'm a mom influencer. And maybe the messaging is, hey ladies, you know, it's always good to have investments for your future. And I found this really cool way that I could be part of these big developments or real estate developments through not having to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars, but slowly being able to participate in these types of deals so that, you know, down the road at X, Y, Z, whatever. I think that's a really interesting approach to bringing in, let's call them the real humans, in the sense of these are people who are never interested, never understood, or never would necessarily partake. I think we'll have a higher propensity to want to get involved than those who know about it already. So I think there's an interesting dynamic creatively that you could take.
That's really interesting. All right. So are these people typically, so I find a mom, I mean, let's just pick this as an example, somebody who's well respected and writes recipes and lives in, that's a bit stereotyped, so forgive me for that, but lives in a gorgeous house and, you know, is an entrepreneur, right? Just to be basic about it. And has a, you know, a great blog on whatever it is that she's doing, is very popular and has a huge following. So is she likely to be a professional influencer, somebody who understands her worth as an influencer? Or is this somebody who one has to approach and say, hey, look, we'd like you to talk about, you know, what we're doing. And then let's you and I talk about how to do that. So how do they self-categorize?
There's so many different ones, right? I would really look for the ones that are more relatable, more so than the ones that are aspirational. So there's relatable with a side of aspiration, right? Because, you know, humans are humans. But, you know, you have that, let's call them the desperate housewife model, which is this very wealthy, et cetera, type of woman. But I think the ones that are my favorite and the ones that we work with the most are these relatable mom figures. So they're not these wealthy women. They're just like you and I, but they've built their personality online. Okay. So it's not necessarily Range Rover toting, you know, Louis Vuitton bag, women. It's just like we represent a really inspirational woman who does these wine Wednesdays where she drinks a glass of wine, just hair up, and she talks to women and women engage with her. That's the type of mom I think would work best. But it's just about bringing that audience an opportunity, giving them the information they need, not to necessarily make the final decision, but to feel comfortable about going down that path of seeing what it's about, and then setting them off on that path, right? And then from a business perspective, it's the development's job or whatever it is to get them further down that funnel. But it's just allowing us to get larger amounts of people in a very warm way into that funnel, as opposed to a very, if we did Facebook ads or we did standard advertising, it's not going to be taken the same, which is the total reason why influencer exists, right?
Exactly right. So how does one? So you're talking about somebody with whom you already work. So presumably there is some kind of value placed on that person's engagement with your product in front of their audience. So tell me a little about what the different ways that somebody like this can engage with the product and introduce it to their audience.
So let's just for the audience sake, clarify that there's hundreds of thousands of these types of influencers. So it's not just moms, there's dads, there's LGBT communities, there's artists, there's cyclists, there's fishermen. Like, it's very broad. From the standard approach to activating someone like this is to figure out their value yourself, right? So taking a look at, how many people is this going to affect, right? So that could be an average viewership on their content. So we get an idea of how many people are watching. Mm-hmm. What's the sentiment around the comments that we're seeing on their content? Are they engaging? Or are they just looking? I think that's a major one, and a big takeaway for your audience would be distinguishing between, who's a influencer and who's a looker, right? And sometimes people follow someone not because they care about what they say, but maybe they're aesthetically pleasing, or maybe they, make me laugh from time to time. But if he tells me to invest in something, what does he know? He's a goof on Instagram, right? So finding that genuine connection is really important. But once you've found that, what we now want to do is approach that influencer with an idea of what we're looking to achieve, right? And in most cases, depending on the scale of the development or what you're trying to raise, or et cetera, let's say for the bigger ones, you're going to want to approach influencers who have pretty substantial audiences, and then figure out what it's worth in terms of your payment to them. They're not going to work on an affiliate model where you're paying them based on the money they raise, et cetera.
Yeah.
That world has come and gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then from a smaller influencer perspective, it's about forming the relationships with them and seeing what they want in order to partake in such an activation. So go in with the understanding with the bigger ones that, I need to pay to play. They have an audience, they've earned it. I can't disrespect that. And I got to figure out what is it worth to me. And I got to take a gamble, just like any type of marketing is. And then with the smaller influencers, sometimes it's good to get acquainted with them, build a relationship, to let them tell you what they want, right? So you'll get crazies who say they want crazy amounts of money to do things, et cetera. But you might get people who are willing to say, hey, I want to try it. If it works really well, then, maybe we can work out a deal, or et cetera. So just approaching the different tiers of influencer in the understanding that, you need to invest in them, and you need to make that commitment of that financial commitment to make it fly.
Fascinating. And then in what ways, again, specifically in my world, in what ways might an influencer micro, and we could talk about micro, nano, and whatever the other scales are in a moment, but in what way might an influencer actually express an opinion? Are they going to say, hey, I'm just like, how do they do it? Right?
I'll give you two kind of real life examples of like just a pure hypothetical.
Okay.
YouTube as a platform is extremely is way less casual than the other platforms. It's more of a time investment for the person watching, which puts people in a different state as a consumer, right? They're usually sat down, they're ready to invest 15, 20, half an hour. So that is where I think the biggest strength is for raising, in the particular scenario we're talking about. I think YouTube's the best. It's the most expensive, but I think the best for what we're talking about. you go to a YouTuber and that YouTuber does vlogs, which are basically videos about their life, let's say. Let's just make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
And during that episode, we would sponsor a piece of it where organically we would have the influencer either sit down or is driving or whatever it may be, and them walk through the process of what crowdfunding in this manner is, why they're considering it or have done it, and educating the audience in a very organic flow in their content. And then our KPI or our conversion will come from, I've put a link below here for you guys to find out more about it. Click on that link, etc. We'll track that link through. We're moving audience through that link and now hopefully raising for the fund, right? In a more casual scenario, if you find the right influencer, you could go to Instagram stories, for instance. But I think, you get in there, influencer goes on Instagram story, does a video of themselves explaining the process. This isn't like rocket science, right? Okay. Influencers explaining the process, maybe even walking someone through the process, like on YouTube or Instagram, actually showing them investing in the project, etc., are all ways that I think are really, really cool. But the reason I mentioned Instagram stories as opposed to Instagram in general is for these types of campaigns, the golden egg is conversion, right? Converting people to invest. Mm-hmm. So a big mistake that marketers make is they'll go to platforms that don't have those capabilities. And we got to rely on people to leave the platform and go. So Instagram stories allow us to swipe up and go directly to the page, and we can capture and retarget against that type of information. And we've moved people. On YouTube, we have the link capability. If we were to do what I just said on Instagram as a video, it would work, but we wouldn't be able to track a single thing. So, keeping in mind that each platform's components have different features and different ways to utilize influencers to get the conversion too. So it's a lot, but I'm trying to make it as condensed as I can.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating, Joe. It's just absolutely perfect what we're talking about. So is there a lot of prep? So let's say we identify somebody that says, yes, I buy into this. It's interesting. I don't know anything about it. I've never heard of crowdfunding before, but I'm willing to learn, right? So what's then the process? I mean, is there like hours of training and how do you deal with that?
So I think the most important part is, the organicness of it, right? How you win an influencer is being as organic as possible. So I would say from whoever's crowdfunding standpoint, whoever's running it, building a relationship with them, showing them what the real benefit is, really introducing the influencer to what is going on in a way that they're truly invested in terms of their understanding and et cetera, I think is really important to a good campaign first and foremost. So you're giving the influencer an opportunity to say, this crowdfunding thing sucks and I'm going to lose my money and I don't want to do it. You don't want them to do that afterwards, and you don't want them to make content on the premise that that's why they're doing it. So showing them that it's safe, showing them how it works, showing them that it's innovative, showing them that it could be beneficial to their audience is cool, and that time should be taken from the brand. In terms of the influencer piece, it's pretty straightforward. It's contracting, right? Getting them on a contract to dictate the terms of what they're going to post, what their deliverables are, et cetera. Second would be briefing. So what are the key points we want the influencer to make sure they touch on? Giving them leeway to make content the way they want to make it, but understanding that, we still need to drive the messaging around what we're doing. And then third is tracking it, right? So I would say in a scenario where you're very small and you want to do influencer, you can do it on your own, one influencer here and there. But influencer marketing is inherently a pain in the butt. And that's just because it's people management. More so than firing a Facebook ad. So when you start to want to scale and stuff, influencers are late. Influencers can be rude. It's just dealing with every day. Hire a bunch of people to work for you who you just met, right? Right. So that's when you think about being really impactful, raising enough money, getting serious about this form of marketing, et cetera. That's where an agency comes in, and then you're kind of hands off. They develop the strategy. They work like we would work with them. We would do the brief together. They would approve the influencers, and then we would handle the execution. And then from a finale, it would be really making sure you're tracking every component. So how many people, invested? How many people came to the site and left? Which influencers worked best and why? Which platforms work? And then you optimize and you run it again. So each time you run it, you're getting more and more lucrative with that specific campaign.
Fascinating. Quick question. So if there is an influencer, do they have to announce that what they're saying is sponsored or somehow they're being paid for it?
Yes, absolutely. It's gonna greatly depend. Like Viral Nation's an international marketing company, so like we have an in-house attorney who knows the laws of like the Emirates and Asia and etc. But I'd say the key hubs of marketing, being United States, Canada, Europe, etc. They all have requirements that require disclosure, and it's just I'd say even 30-40% of the industry still doesn't disclose it. It's new. It's only really hit its gold rush in the last 2 or 3 years. So everyone, I think, even from a government perspective and a regulatory perspective, is trying to catch up to it. But from we're one of the largest in the world. Like every campaign we run has full disclosure, and I think that's important.
All right, so let's talk about pricing and measurement of results again. I know you've kind of given me a general idea that you can ask what somebody, what they want, and some people have already priced themselves because they've already been paid. But let's think about, first of all, just as an FYI, you can't pay somebody a percentage of what they raise. It's not legal. You have to be a broker dealer and licensed and regulated and everything. So that's... It can't be done anyway, even though you said it's not.
Right.
But so how is it, how do you set about that? And presumably they are priced, there's some tracking of results, some measurement of results. So how is that measurement done? And does that kind of back into the pricing in some way?
Yeah, so pricing, so the mistake a lot of people new to the space make is they price based off of vanity metrics. And vanity metrics, Adam, is just simply their overall following count. Right. That's a big problem because you may look at an influencer or a social content creator and say, wow, this person has 1 million followers on YouTube. I got to pay them $10,000, $20,000, whatever. Whereas their average view on a YouTube video is 100,000, right? And there's another influencer who's better for the program, has 300,000 subscribers on YouTube, so almost a third. And then they're driving 250,000 views a video, which is more than double the performance. But in the world of influencer, because it's new, this influencer with 1 million subscribers is getting paid far more than this one. So my biggest pricing tip or expertise that I've gained through, we're going to spend over $20 million in influencers this year. So we do this like at a high level, is understanding how to pay on guaranteed deliverables. So I want to guarantee my YouTube views, and I want to understand what my cost per view is and how that meets the industry standard. And every platform has different average costs, and every type of influencer. So believe it or not, a fashion influencer costs way more than a sports influencer does. And it's all supply and demand, basic economic stuff. There's more brands spending more marketing dollars in fashion and beauty than they are in sports. So each vertical of influencer, each type of platform, each of these things plays into these numbers where we feel comfortable. And we have internally this huge system for that. But I would say, if you're not using an agency to manage that, I would say, make sure you're pricing it based off of the actual numbers you're seeing and not necessarily the view, the account size, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it does. And of course, you're not able to tell with YouTube. Let's say somebody mentions the real estate crowdfunding platform or the sponsor at 10 minutes, part way through a video. You can tell how many of those viewers have managed to get all the way through and actually watched it to that point, right? So that's obviously, go ahead.
You can't as an advertiser on your own. I can because we have software to do that, but you're not going to be able to get that information.
Oh, on my YouTube channel, in my data, I can see what proportion of people have watched.
Yourself.
Yes.
I can't see yours.
Oh, you can't see my data?
No, unless you opt in. So I don't know what the average watch times of your videos are unless you ask. So part of our criteria when working for an influencer is having that data come in so that we can make, and you're 100% correct. Why would I sponsor the video at 15 minutes, right? If at 10 minutes, 80% of the audience has dropped off, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's a big piece. And I'm sorry I missed the question about reporting. You know, we have a product called InfluSoft that we built, and basically what it does is it'll pull everything you can see as an influencer on your YouTube channel, Instagram channel. I have access to because we're a licensed partner. So we can get every piece of data physically available on that campaign period.
So I'm fascinated by this, Joe. This is really interesting. So do you now track in the same way as you would a let's say a Facebook ad campaign, and you mentioned remarketing. So how does that work? Do you then follow up with Facebook ads or YouTube ads, or is there any way to follow up? Obviously, if you've got lead generation links, then you've got emails and names, and you can follow up with CRM, etc. But if it's softer, somebody watched it but didn't take action, what are the steps to now reinforcing the messaging directly from the sponsor?
So it gets complicated, but we're a full service agency. So we with influencer, we have like 7 other divisions that can help. So I'll give you an example. You run a YouTube campaign with an influencer, you put that link, you're going to create a custom landing page for that specific link so that we can retarget against those converted people, which is that hot target, right? And we can retarget from them from wherever the hell we want, really, right? Because they've already been pixeled from being on the site. Then what we can do is do what's called a paid boost. So we can boost the post we just did to the remainder of the audience who didn't get to see it just because algorithmic things and things out of our control. And then what we do is, of the people who engaged with the content, we can retarget against them on social only. Now, the difference between Facebook ads and et cetera are that when I hit you with a Facebook ad, I got you. Like in terms of being able to revisit you, make sure you're served with ads and consistency, change creative, et cetera. It has a lot more data and a lot more tracking availability. The social platforms in an organic sense have created these little barriers everywhere that you can't get over. So at a certain time, I'd say the biggest difference is a lot of the organic traffic. So I'm on YouTube on my piece, I'm on my phone, and I see that ad from the YouTube influencer, and I put my phone down and I Google, the crowdfunding site. That person is gone forever. Whereas on a YouTube or an Instagram or a Facebook ad, I'd be able to see that type of a conversion. So these are the types of differences. It's not. I'd say it's about 50% as analytically capable as regular paid ads.
Okay, so but when you talk about remarketing, you're talking about sending videos back to them, or this is remarketing through ads specifically?
Remarketing through ads against that influencer's audience.
Okay, got it. Right.
So they've seen it. They've been predisposed to the crowdfunding around this in an organic way. Mm-hmm. You didn't do anything, Adam. Yeah. Now we're going to come at you on Facebook and a couple other areas just to make sure you for sure weren't interested. So that's right. That's the other side, and why that's so damn effective is because when you were introduced to it, you weren't introduced to it as an ad. You were introduced to it very warmly, and then the ads came after. So those ads have a huge propensity to perform better, which is another kind of benefit of influencer in general.
And then now with YouTube. So actually, no, I was going down the wrong track. We're just starting to do some YouTube advertising. So I want to stay on influencers. Okay, so let's think about, so let's stay with YouTube. So what am I going to be doing to identify people that I want to communicate with, or that if right? So let's serious, right? I mean, I actually have somebody in mind I want to introduce you to when we finish talking today, right. Like really proactively. So this is a real live conversation, right? Live Nation, live podcast kind of thing.
Right.
So how do we, let's say we're looking at YouTube and we want to identify people who are suitable? Because this gets back to the same question I asked in the beginning. There are those people who are used to it, right? To being paid as an influencer. But based on what I understand from you and our conversation so far, my area, my field, has not really been touched yet, or at least to a very, very limited extent. Zero. Okay, so now we're going into blue ocean territory.
Yeah, which is beautiful.
We're going to be talking to people who are either professionals or who are not. Either way, they've never done this kind of promotion before. Absolutely. What are the steps that you will take to identify the right kind of person and then to engage them? And what is the role of the client as well, the sponsor?
Yeah, so I'm going to skip the manual way, which would be, I can't afford an agency like Viral Nation. I got to do it on my own, because that one is very manual, right? Find ones that look good through manual search, reach out to them, get them to send you their data to make sure they're good. It's a lot harder, right? From our perspective, we have a tech partner, so I can search based on criteria every single YouTube channel in the world at any time. So your role, or the client's role, would be to help us get as deadly as possible in terms of understanding the project, the people that we're looking for, the propensity of those people. Do we have examples of the past? Just prepping us with as much ammunition as we can to really get understanding. Then our creative strategy team gets pulled in, and they will basically create what's called, just basically a roadmap of what are the types of verticals of influencer we think we want to start looking at. What are the sizes of these influencers based on a bunch of different criteria? What are the platforms we want to look on? And what is the engagement rates, etc. So they create this roadmap, and then our team goes in and we start pulling out options from YouTube. And then once we've had, depending on the scale of the campaign, we run campaigns that have a couple hundred influencers at a time, right? We'll pull 20, 30 influencers. We'll build rationale behind them, cases behind them. We'll look at their demographics. And then we basically provide the client with this list, essentially, of influencer, rationale, audience demographic breakdown, etc. And then let them help us make that decision. Because at the end of the day, everything from an influencer approval, content approval, everything is essentially approved by the client. If they're wrong, we'll say, hey, listen, stop. You guys don't know what you're talking about. This isn't right. But at the end of the day, our clients get full approval of each step of the way, right? So once we have that, then we launch. So we handle that kind of intermediary process between how to source these folks correctly.
Fascinating. How does it compare, Joe, or how do the results typically compare with just going with a straight ad campaign? So whatever, let's take the cost of your services, paying the influencers, and say, let's drop that into a Facebook campaign. How do those typically compare in terms of results, and how do you measure those two against each other?
Well, I think, what we're talking about specifically is how much money am I putting in needs to be outweighed by the money that's coming back, or else I should just put that money right into the property myself, right? So that opens up Pandora's box a little bit for me personally, because we have a very strong performance marketing side, where I would say for a campaign like that, my number one budget tier of spend wouldn't even go towards Facebook ads. It would go to what's called performance marketing, which is super, super low cost ad units that are built to convert. So like we can get really low cost per customer acquisition. And Facebook and Instagram and YouTube ads and stuff is an expensive channel now, more than ever. And there's thousands of other channels that exist, affiliate channels that exist that we tap into daily. It's almost like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube have become like the white horse, like we have to have them. They're not going to make anyone a billionaire, but they're very important and whatever. But here's the other crazy guys over here are making all the money. And these guys sometimes do really well, sometimes don't. Influencers is very much the same thing. So influencers is a hit or miss product. So you got to look at influencers a little bit differently. You activate one and that one sucks. That one sucks. You activate two, they could both suck. They could both be great. It's very fluid and non-dynamic, right? So the more spread you have, the larger the propensity to have a win is. And you have to look at influencer a tad differently too. There's more value than just the return. You're going to get content ownership, so you're going to own that content, be able to use it in a number of different places. So that would have a cost. We're going to get the retargeting list and be able to make our Facebook ads we're doing already work more efficiently. That's another benefit. So there's other benefits on top of just influencer posts, influencer drives me this much money. But I would say on the funnel of conversion, influencers are somewhere in the high middle. They're not a crazy converter, but I've seen them go crazy and viral. And you know, we have probably close to 25, 30 clients who are on performance models with influencers where influencers are pushing customer acquisition. So it does work. It just needs to be very invested in and taken very seriously. It can't just be dabbling with influencers. Does that make sense?
And do they typically, I mean, so and is it typically a long-term relationship? Is it a one-off? Is it daily posting? What's the best way of approaching it? What have you found are best practices in that regard?
So we represent the brand, right? So influencers are a vehicle to success of our brands, not the other way around, right? So we approach it like, yes, we want to learn long-term relationship with you. And there's certain influencers where long-term relationships are fantastic, but I'm not going to commit to a long-term relationship with you until I see that you're actually able to move the goods, period.
Okay.
So if we get into a relationship with an influencer and they perform really well, then there's an opportunity for a long-term investment. If we work with an influencer right out of the gate and we pay them and, you know, we pay them $5,000 and they raise, 23 cents to the fund, better believe we're not keeping going. And a lot of people getting an influencer make a mistake. They read a lot of articles about long-term relationships with influencers is the key, blah, 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 blah. And they go into these relationships for 6 months with someone they haven't used. They do the first post, they sell nothing, and now they want to jump off the building, right? So there's a happy medium to test and then develop the relationship after. It puts the brand and yourself in a better position.
Interesting. And so what kind of test, I mean, how long would you expect to test typically? Or is that a day?
Yeah,
oh, really?
Yeah. Doesn't have to be a huge cumbersome process. You can get them to do a singular post, a group of 3 or 4 different posts on a couple of channels, whatever you need to effectively see what that move is. Because I'm a proponent of, if they're going to move, they're going to move. They're not going to not move on the first one and move on the fourth. Someone's going to move on the first. That's going to give us an indication. So as long as we have that original indication, we're solid. And then we're able to determine. The other thing too that people forget is influencers have a burnout rate, right? Influencers just don't keep selling like the first time, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time, because the people who bought it already aren't going to buy it again. And now they're convincing a whole new subsect of their audience. And that new subsect of the audience might not give a shit, right? So you got to balance that burnout point as well without getting into these relationships. But we're talking about this, just to be clear, on a very performance basis, conversion basis, revenue driving basis.
Okay.
On a brand level, when we're trying to establish a brand, build a brand, really work on awareness, changing the perception of a brand, making a brand look great, etc., these types of conversations are very different, because it's how do we secure long-term relationships to get that great content and that consistency? How do we activate on YouTube for full-size videos? It's a very different angle. Yeah. And we have 2 sides of our business here, like split for that reason.
So look, I'm really pleased that you understand my industry despite being zero yet. So it's really appreciated. So before I forget, and let's kind of move towards wrapping up because I want to be respectful of your time. Before I forget, I've got 2 questions and I've got my last 3 questions, right? Just the last 3 are just the ones I ask everyone every time. What is the difference between, perhaps we've already talked about this, but I've heard of these terms nano and micro and mega and et cetera. So what are those differences?
In the world of performance and conversion, doesn't really mean shit, to be honest with you, because you sacrifice things on the bottom end that you don't get at the top end. So a nano influencer is someone who's obviously very small. Usually, a nano would be, you have 1,000 followers to like 5,000. I have friends who have that. They're very I don't want to call them normalized. They're just like a normal human with a lot of friends, basically, as a nano influencer. And people like that generally have a really cool propensity to work for great little startups, local startups, there's different uses for them in a really cool way, make really cool content. They're really cheap to make content. There's a number of reasons why they're great. Micro influencers is a whole other beast. It's a big part of influencer marketing. Smaller influencers, again, 10,000 to 50,000 followers, let's say, and bloggers and etc. And that's where you'll see a lot of the affiliate programs running. You know, they're posting stuff and they're getting paid commissions on it. The affiliate space is there. Brand ambassador spaces are really big there. And for something like this, is the juice worth the squeeze is really what you have to understand, right? So yeah, the micro influencer is a safer investment for me because they cost me, $800. But how much time did I invest? How much money did they raise? And did that make sense? And a lot of people don't do that math, unfortunately. I'd say the mid-tier of influencer is where people play the most in performance and conversion, just because at least I'm getting a couple 100,000 people to see this thing at once. It's like a commercial almost, right? And I can justify my time. Yeah, my miss is going to hurt a little bit more than if I miss on a guy who's $800. But if I spread it properly, I should be okay. And then there's the macro, and the macros are the big bears. I think they're very valuable, the big influencers. But the problem is their cost to entry, and that each level is a higher roller is getting involved, who's ready to take more risks, because you could pay a nano influencer $800 or $200 and they post and they raise $1,000, great. And then you could pay a macro influencer $100,000, $200,000 for a YouTube video. He might raise you $1 million, but he might eat your 200 alive and it's dead, right? So there's parts that are a little bit tricky, right? I've run performance campaigns on the highest level, macros, $2-3 million in 30 days, big influencers, and it's worked out every time, but it was never one guy or girl. And that's important. So, and making sure that you have someone like us who really, like, when we get into that level, it's game on in terms of making sure that every single possible thing we can uncover is uncovered to make sure we're going to be successful, right? So for our clients, what we recommend usually is a mixture of all of them. But in the case of this, I'd say mid-tier to big guys would probably be the best bang for the buck for what you're trying to achieve.
All right, which leads me into the last question. It is, of course, the question that I know everyone that's watching or listening is thinking, and that is, all right, what is my entry point? If I'm spending, I don't know, five to 10,000 a month on production and advertising, right, on Facebook, what is going to be my, how should I be budgeting for influencer marketing, including your fees and expenses, etc.? Yeah.
What is the average amount they're trying to raise?
Gosh, it's so low to high tens of millions US.
So I would say, in terms of this is cool, because I think there's opportunity here with us even afterwards. Like, our performance marketing team can eat that stuff alive in a way that I don't think we can have a side conversation about that. And getting to that type of a scale where we can raise that whole 10 million, right? Like, we can do that on that side. And I think from a paid social perspective, being able to scale that, like, if that was my project, my paid performance channel would probably be kicking at like 100K a month. Like, that's how much we would kick that up. But in terms of influencer, I think for something like that to be worth the time that needed to be invested from both teams, I'd say an entry point of about 50,000 would probably be where I would be. I think
that's initial budget, is it you're talking about?
That's the initial budget to run something to get an idea of if this is going to work for that project or not. I know it doesn't sound sexy or great. It's for a lot of people, but by the time you test the different levels, you get enough influencers to make a fight, et cetera, you need to be there. I'd say 50K is probably the minimum for something like that. Below that, we could get something going, but our team would have to know there was a propensity to spend more if it worked.
Yeah.
Because then at that point, we're just trying to hit like a vein, right? With a very limited, scope, right? So I'd say 50K as an entry point would be a good number, including kind of everything.
Joe, you are a star for having this conversation. Yeah, you figured out this market, and I'm really thrilled that we've spoken. Let me ask you 3 final questions. These are sign-off questions that I ask all my guests. Sure. Eventually, I'll put this into some kind of series of some sort that I'll publicize. All right. So, first question: What is the most important thing someone, a real estate developer, just starting to raise money online should keep in mind? What do you think they should keep in mind?
I think that the first thing they should do is develop their brand and their aesthetic and their content to be appealing to as many people as possible, even if it's for investment purposes. Because in this day and age, I think that even people like me think I'm a young CEO. I've built a company worth a lot of money, and I'm interested in those type of things. I buy real estate. I've been starting to do that, etc. In order to attract me, that old stale kind of marketing material isn't going to work anymore. So I think investing in the right partner to make great content, great video content, and really give blood to what you're trying to do will make all the difference in every channel moving forward.
Fantastic. Thank you. I should hire you to rep as an influencer for me. Yeah. Second question. Yeah. What has been the hardest lesson you've learned personally online?
The hardest lesson I've learned online is that, like everything in life, you're going to run across people with bad intentions and ill intentions online, especially more than you would face-to-face. Online gives people this innate ability to hide, and that innate ability to hide brings out the worst in some people. And I've seen some pretty terrible stuff, both in communications with others on social and influencers and people we represent to brands, etc. And then this huge entire market of fraudulent social pages that are charging people like your listeners who are trying to get into the space and trying to do these amazing things, who don't have and shouldn't have the experience to be able to spot those types of things. They're preying on those types of people in certain situations. So I would just say the hardest lesson I learned was how dirty online can be, and how important it is to make sure you have the right knowledge around you before you really start doing anything in it in a meaningful way.
Last question, Joe. What are your personal key daily habits that keep you successful?
Oh, we might have to redo that.
One is putting your phone on mute during a
It's not. It's on my computer. My phone is on mute. That didn't go.
Just kidding. Now I've said that, I'm like, where's my phone? I forgot. It's somewhere under this mess I've got my desk.
Okay, last question. You want to start it from the question again?
Yeah. So the question is, what are your daily habits that make you successful, particularly in your online activities?
I think for me now is the team that I've hired to do it. But I think what made me most successful in general in an online business and an online world was literally surrounding me with people who knew more about it than me. That's what made me most successful. And I'd say 80% of what I talk to you guys about today, I've learned over the past 7 years from other people. A lot of it has come from my personal experience, but surrounding yourself with people who know is important in an area where you can't figure it out.
Joe, thanks so very much. What an enormous pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
That was Joe Gagliese, co-founder of Viral Nation, North America's top influencer marketing agency. Fascinating, right? Influencer marketing is an almost untouched area of opportunity to explore for real estate syndication. So be sure to watch this space to learn more about this in due course. And of course, go to the show notes page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com, where you can watch a bunch of short highlight clips from my conversation with Joe, get some links to his website and resources, and gain access also to the whiteboard workshop that I put together for you that shows you exactly how to build your very own investor acquisition system so you can raise capital online. It's totally free and will be the most important thing you watch all year. It's available for immediate access right there on the podcast page at gowercrowd.com. Hey, thanks for listening, and thank you, Joe Gagliese, co-founder and influencer marketing visionary, for being willing to explore an untapped opportunity with me today. That's all for this episode. I'll see you next time, and for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off.